largest march for climate change happened on the streets of New York City. And to coincide, at the United Nations headquarters just a few blocks away, more than 100 of the world's leaders met to discuss this issue. They met to discuss what over 97% of scientists have already agreed, that climate change is imminent. Really, what we are here to discuss today is the goal that came from the Paris talks. So reducing the global fossil fuel usage while at the same time promoting clean energy sources. And the way that we have identified doing this is by reducing the projected temperature rise to, 2 degrees by 2100. So I'm just going to do a sort of high-level overview of the model that we came up with, and then my colleagues will go ahead and go into more depth. Some of the highlights. Pretty much right off the bat, we want to start increasing those taxes on the fossil fuel industry. We have $6 per kilojoule starting in 2015. This is so that we can ensure that those harmful effects on the environment are reduced as soon as possible. In 2025, we have, at the same time, subsidizing alternative energy. So, so right now, we are looking at starting pretty much right off the bat with our efforts to reduce those fossil fuels. In 2025, we want to have the carbon price set at $200 a ton, and while that might seem a little dramatic, if you'll say, we do feel that having it start in 2025 will mitigate those concerns that some of our key stakeholders might have, and also just keeping in mind that the actual discounted price per ton in 2025 would be $95. So really, it's not going to be as drastic as you see here on our chart. And then in 2050, we want to make sure that we are cutting those emissions by 67%, and we are also reducing land use. So that would be our agriculture team.
We want to take a look at some of the projected long-term outcomes and benchmarks from the plan that we developed. We will have the implementation of the carbon emission tax by 2025, investment into research and development with breakthroughs for sustainable and fossil fuel consumption by 2020. We're also looking for a reduction in fossil fuel energy consumption to less than 100 exajoules per year by 2060, right here. And renewables are set to overtake fossil fuel consumptions by 2045. And we want to have the long-term goal of having carbon emissions to less than 5 G-tons per year by 2045 as well. And then temperature rise begins to level off. We don't have that chart up on here, but the rise begins to level off by 2040 and then does not exceed the 2 degrees Celsius increase by 2100.
And so to identify the lessons that we learned from the simulator about how global climate change works, here's some things that we picked up. That the policy package was not sustainable below 1.9 population growth or GDP. If we went any lower, it was not going to be feasible. So we had to go above 1.9. And then the sectors that were impacted the most were energy efficiency and fossil fuels. The carbon price needed to remain high in order to achieve the temperature goal of 2 degrees, no more than 2 degrees centigrade in 2100, in the year 2100. Well, so that we did not alienate the sectors that were most impacted by the increase or by the having to sacrifice the most, being the energy efficiency and fossil fuels. Of course, we're going to compensate them with the subsidies that we get from taxation so that they can invest that in their research and development so that they can increase efficiency.
So when we talk about stakeholders, we really kept in mind what is the strength and weakness of our plan, because just coming up with model is not everything. We really need to implement this, and not just another 5 or 6 years, but another century. So we looked into strength, and of course the strength is we were able to decrease the temperature change below 2 degree by 2040, which was really great news for us. And other opportunities are also like the idea of open negotiations and their room for improvement by 2025 before we increase our carbon tax. Also, in terms of weakness or even threats, we also have come up with all these different things that may go wrong in the long run. For example, political instability or different kind of uncertainties. And in order to kind of target those areas, in order to not run into a problem of a lack of enforcement or compliance, we have identified areas where we can start working right away. And for just to mention some of our strong stakeholders, which we believe will be on top of this moving forward, were our sustainable energy and climate hawks. And for them, it's really important issue as it for many of us. And the rationale for them is the ability to meet minimum temperature goal, able to reduce the use of fossil fuel, stakeholder satisfaction. There are a lot of information going around on table, and a lot of people were not happy when we begin the talk. But we were able to come down to this point. We were able to have this idea of sacrifice and cost-benefit analysis really worked well. So in terms of implementation timeline, we are in 2014 right now. So we're looking into starting right away by 2015. As you can see, the buffer zone between our buffer timeline between 2014 to 2025, we are going to use that for preparation and planning for our tax implementation for carbon emission. And that's really critical, important for our plan, because without doing that, we will not be able to impose those carbon tax in 2025. Especially, again, in 2015, we'll work on taxing our fossil fuels, coal, oil, and gas. I don't think that's a far-fetched to ask, because those things are already underway in many countries. Subsidy policy for renewables, biomass, nuclear, and new technology will also begin in 2015. And the important thing I want to point out is we are going to start our staffing right away in 2015 in order to really get into this nitty-gritty part of coordinate with other focus group, how we can implement this moving forward. In order to do that, we have really identified 5 different positions which will be working with our secretariat or G20 commission. And those 5 different individuals will be working in fields like community outreach, fields like environment or scientific technology or energy, and even like political spectrum, in order to reach out to the countries which are not on board right now, or maybe in order to mitigate the problems that might come in the long run, or even just like community outreach and reaching out to the global citizenry and creating the awareness that fighting against climate change is really important. And as a group, we have come to this conclusion that if we can follow this, we will be able to meet our goal and have this plan successful.
I was wondering if you guys had any issues with your, seems to be a low rating on your GDP at 2.7. If you could explain how you plan on addressing that.
Well, we did see that we couldn't adjust GDP that much without it causing feasibility issues with the program. But we did feel like we had to make some compromise for that group because everybody else that was participating in the discussion was making some kind of sacrifice. and for the two of us that were on the population and consumption sector, we felt that there had to be a minimum. I think we reduced it from the current 2.2% growth to 2% over time, which did reduce the satisfaction a little bit, but still we had a satisfaction level that we thought was manageable. We thought that that was important because if we put too much pressure on some of the more powerful stakeholders like the fossil fuel industry, that could just damage the whole plan. We took into consideration that those stakeholders are very powerful, and their concerns had to be addressed, even if it was just a little bit, because we know that those numbers for GDP and population growth could be manipulated very little. But we did try to take that into consideration to show that there was a compromise among all groups. Do you want to?
Yes. Just to add on to that, we kept in mind that the population are the same people that are going to cough up the taxes. So you don't want to push them too hard and reduce them, because they really are the source. If you don't have the people to pay the taxes, you're a non-starter. So basically, you have to balance it out, and that's kind of the compromise we came to.
It looks like you guys did a straight subsidies for both all renewable, new tech, and nuclear. And it looks from your chart you probably have some sort of technology development in your nuclear. But how do you justify investing a subsidy in new tech when you don't see any increase in new tech and it doesn't like really help you solve the crisis with that investment? So is it an empty investment is basically my question.
Yes, and I mean, it may sound like that, look like that, but I think the reason we kind of go into that is because we really wanted to make a deal among stakeholders. And even though it may look infeasible right now, again, going back to our implementation framework and how we are going to work with our secretariat to maybe able to find a fund that can, from developing world, or developed parts of the world, to fund this and really understand that this can happen, but in terms of having this investment in the front run. I mean, if you really want to go below 2.0, that was the feasible model we can come up with the negotiations that were in the table.
I just wanted to add something to that as well, because with the renewable energies that we have, nuclear, those are tested technologies that we know work. The new technology investment in that is a risk, and it's a risk that was too high, that we thought was too high to take. We thought that an increase in something like nuclear, we could invest the money to make that technology safer and decrease the need to depend on fossil fuels.
So I'll make a quick point. Actually, new technology doesn't appear to change on the graph because technology isn't itself a form of energy. So even though it looks on the graph like it doesn't move, it is contributing to all of the other sources of energy. It just doesn't move on the graph because it in itself is not a form of energy. So, so it can't move even.
So I noticed that your carbon tax or your carbon market, however you're implementing the price, doesn't start until 2025. And I'm wondering if you can think of any other case where any sort of government agency has, or governmental body has committed itself to a policy 10 years in the future, and how you can commit yourself to a policy that won't be implemented until 10 years into the future.
Good question.
Well, I mean, I think when we're looking at the overall project here, we're looking 100 years into the future. So 10 years into the future, we didn't feel like was that long of a time frame. We also thought it was an advantage, actually, in that it gave the opportunity for countries to get buy-in, for industries to get to buy into this, this tax that would be coming up. So we thought having that extended period of time would actually allow us to get to that level rather than implementing it sooner when there might be more resistance to it. And also, like my colleague was saying, to have the time to do outreach activity, to do get more buy-in from the different stakeholders that are involved in reducing the global temperature or maintaining at least a 2-degree decrease.
Yeah. Besides this, as we stated, is that there's quite some consensus on the fact that we do need to do something about climate change. So on the one hand, a lot of people are already on board, and that period of time, again, gives us time to kind of move the ball forward and to prepare. The governments need to prepare, whether there's regime change or whatever. The people are already on board, hopefully, and that's kind of implemented. We've already hired the 5 people to make sure that that is kind of moving the ball forward so that it's going to be easier to implement it. And monies can begin to be, allocated in certain sectors to kind of decide where we're going to cut, where we're going to do this in preparation for the implementation. So that's really the goal of giving that buffer time.